Hello again everyone, Melth here. Playing so much Baldur's Gate 3 recently, as well as the steady flow of new content for the new version of D&D 5e, has made me want to talk about a long-standing problem with D&D 5e and games based on it: advantage. Other games with similar mechanics have similar problems too, but I'm going to focus this video on the 5e version of things, both because that's the most popular and influential system, and also because, in 5e, advantage is not just one mechanic among many. It is at the heart of the game, like a clogged artery, one of the root causes of many of the seemingly different problems I've seen DMs and players talk about over the decade of this system existing. But let's start with the basics, and with things that should be basic but aren't. First of all, when I say advantage, I'm referring to both what 5e calls advantage and disadvantage. The general idea that instead of rolling one d20, adding your modifiers to that, and comparing that to a target number, you instead roll two d20s, take the higher, or lower for disadvantage, of those, and then add your modifiers to that and compare it to the target number. Sounds simple. Everyone's happy, right? Wrong. Let me ask you, how much is advantage worth? How much does it add to your die roll? Go on and think for a moment if you need to. Did you say 5? Maybe 3.4 if you're spicy? Something else? Congratulations, you're all wrong. And you're also all correct. The value of advantage cannot be accurately expressed as a number. It varies wildly based on the difference between the target number and your modifiers. Heck, even the designers usually get it wrong. Let's graph how much it matters and talk about some examples. So, if you needed a 20 to succeed to begin with, then advantage nearly doubles your chance to succeed, a nearly 100% increase. But that means it's worth less than a +1 bonus, or plus 5 percentage points to your chance of success if you want to think about it that way. On the other hand, let's say you needed an 11 or higher to succeed, meaning you were at 50-50. Well, now you're at 75%. A 50% greater chance of success, being worth about a +5 modifier. If that sounds confusing, it's because it is. Ultimately, advantage helps you more the closer you were to a 50-50 shot to begin with. It helps you less if you are either very likely to succeed or very likely to fail to begin with. And far from +5 being the normal value of advantage, +5 is the absolute maximum possible it can help you under the most ideal circumstances. In play, the value will often be substantially lower, especially because shrewd players are good at boosting the rolls they want to be good at and avoiding doing the rolls they're pretty bad at to begin with. One result is simply bad strategic moves by players, who often overvalue advantage compared to things like a +2.5 bonus from Bless or Guidance or the like. But this also affects the design of the game too, because whenever the designers say to treat advantage as being worth +5 for things like passive perception or passive initiative, they are often massively inflating its value. And that's before you get into the really weird results. You can get some absolutely bizarre and counterintuitive outcomes from advantage. Let's look at, for example, opposed rolls, such as initiative, or in the 2014 rules, things like grapples and shoves. Let's say both sides have a +5 modifier, symmetrical. And then you give advantage to both sides, also symmetrical, right? Wrong. Because you've now substantially increased the chance of getting a tie, because it is very likely that both sides will roll on the upper half of a d20. And in D&D 5e, ties are governed under special rules, so this seemingly symmetrical operation actually ends up favoring one side. Quick question. With equal modifiers, what is the chance that someone with disadvantage beats someone with advantage? Intuitively, you'd probably think the chance is pretty tiny, but it's actually around 15%, or about 1/6, surprisingly high. I think the designers must have thought that it was much lower than that, because This now means there's about a 1/6 chance of really stupid outcomes whenever surprise happens under the new rules. Because under the new rules, when you are surprised by an invisible attacker, you don't skip your turn. You just roll initiative with disadvantage, and they roll with advantage. Which means, with no perception check or anything whatsoever to logically reveal to you that there is a potential attacker out there, you go into combat, go first, and might just shoot them before they've done anything to reveal themselves. Heck, that can happen if you're asleep. This isn't like whether Han or Greedo shoots first when they're both ready for action. This is like if Alderaan shot first. It's rather bad for the game's core mechanic to be opaque and confusing and counterintuitive, even seemingly to the designers. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, or perhaps more aptly, the tip of the sword that Advantage is about to run through the game. A much bigger problem with Advantage is that it cannot be stacked. And I don't just mean that the rules explicitly forbid you from stacking it, which they do, and that's bad enough, because we'll soon talk about why you might want to stack Advantage for several different reasons. But even if you house ruled it to be stackable, you'd just be complicating the already weird odds even further, and the diminishing margin of returns would still make it nearly worthless. Let's start with the supposedly normal situation, where the player character has a 60% chance to succeed at something. Okay, Advantage brings that to 84%, about a +5 increase, a little less. Hypothetical double advantage takes them only to 93.6%, meaning that it was worth less than a +2 bonus, less than something like guidance or bless would have been. Hypothetical triple advantage from there is worth less than a +1, almost worthless. So, even if you house rule to let advantage stack, you're basically adding more dice for nothing, and encouraging your players to chase after fool's gold. But we don't have to talk about hypothetical house rules here. This affects the basic rules too. There are a lot of things in the rules, like heroic inspiration or elven accuracy, that a priori function like double advantage, and therefore are much, much less valuable than people think they are. Players tend to think that they are much safer when making rolls like that than they actually are in practice. But all of this is just the math side of things, and honestly, that's not the most important. The much bigger problem with Advantage is that it is corrosive to the core pillars of what is actually supposed to make D&D fun to play. I've seen a lot of DMs talk about how they wish the players interacted with the environment more, which would be good for enhancing tactical combat and encouraging more immersion in the narrative and the setting. But the thing is, the game is actively training players not to do that via the advantage system. See, the game tells the DM to use advantage to represent almost any possible environmental or circumstantial modifier they might have, which means if the players already have advantage from any of the many class features and spells that generate it, the game is telling them your creativity is worthless. You get nothing for interacting with the environment. In fact, it is less than worthless because you probably had to roll some dice to try that or spend some kind of action for it. So no wonder players stop trying when they can just use their reliable class features and spells instead. I've also seen a lot of DMs talk about how they want their players to act more as a team and cooperate instead of just hacking and slashing independently at the monsters. But once again, advantage works against us here, because most ways you can help your teammate are boiled down to giving them advantage, which leads to it being impossible to help them if they already have advantage from any class feature whatsoever. Silly stuff. This of course also hurts verisimilitude and narrative immersion. Exactly why is it that the enemy who is helpless and unconscious on the floor and marked by fairy fire is not in fact any easier to hit than the same guy actually defending himself but marked by fairy fire? It makes no sense. That lack of logic gets even bigger when we get into the problem that any one source of disadvantage cancels out any number of sources of advantage. So you get silly situations like, well, my opponent is helpless and unconscious on the floor. And I am divinely guided to hit him by my vow of enmity against him. And I am using a sword of magical darkness that hits better in these dim conditions. And he is marked by fairy fire, but on the other hand, I'm really kind of scared of that guy across the room over there. So this averages out to, let's see. Oh, I know. The same as if this guy and I were actively fighting each other in a featureless white room. Very silly. Forcing this one-size-fits-all mechanic of non-stacking advantage onto such a wide variety of in-universe situations discourages creativity, blocks teamwork, and breaks narrative immersion all at once. But there's yet another problem, because there are a few things that do stack with advantage. But guess what? Pretty much only spellcasters have access to them. Most of the boosts that martial characters get either give you advantage or let you reroll, which amounts to being the same thing. Spellcasters, on the other hand, do get advantage when they want it. For example, a wizard's familiar is an advantage-generating machine. But they also, right from level 1, start to get numerous bonuses that do stack with advantage and with each other. Things like Guidance, and Bless, and Peace Cleric Bond, and Bardic Inspiration, and the list goes on. It is very rare in comparison for a pure martial character to be able to add anything to anyone's d20 roll. So, advantage ends up contributing to the widespread problem of caster supremacy in 5e2, because only spellcasters get to work around it reliably. As a last major problem, which started off small but has really grown as the game expanded and more abilities were added to it, advantage and all these extra die rolls and rerolls in general simply take more time and mental energy. One of the supposed selling points of advantage to begin with was this notion that it was somehow faster and easier than just adding in modifiers. But that is simply not reasonable. You just can't say that this is inherently simpler than this. I have played both low and high level games in not just D&D 5e, but all previous editions and many other RPGs too. And far from being one of the fastest systems to roll the dice and get your result, D&D 5e is actually one of the slowest. So, based on all that experience and talking to other DMs, what do I think we should do to improve the game? Well, advantage should go entirely. It's not just a bad implementation to tweak around the edges. It is a bad idea to begin with and is fundamentally corrosive to the game and blocks good gameplay. I think the simple solution here is the best one. Just do what previous D&D versions, and indeed most other RPGs do. Add flat modifiers. Whenever the game would give you advantage or disadvantage, just add or subtract 4. Let it stack unless it logically shouldn't for some reason. If you think that's too generous, go with +3 instead. Either way, you'll still be massively improving your game compared to the current system. But if we want to encourage creativity and use of the environment and cooperation, then a bigger modifier is the way to go, I would say. Let me know what you think. Have you tried changing or tweaking or replacing advantage before? Have you seen other games that handle these things better? Do you think a different modifier would be better? And have you seen these or similar or different problems in your own games? I'd be glad to hear from you. Thank you for watching, everyone, and a special thank you to my Patreon supporters: Keely, MasterKnightDH, Jackie, Enlino, Travis, Andrew Curzon, Truebsy, Oliver, Chronische, Jago, AvocadoSandwich, Gregory, Broken Box, Jenna M, Just Becca, Jack, Newbienna, Nicolas Schmuck, Kostya Nesterovich, Fredrik Bruun, Emperor Kong 420, Robin, Stefan Van Zyl, Edie, Mina, Ali Kasimoglu, Skyler Soss, Nick Myers, Ninjaz, Chupatan, Diabetic Cat, Marvin Fang, Max, AvocadoSandwich, Lodestone, Bic Mars, Brad, IJ23, Rodrigo Lopez Dotto, The Coding Owl, Silent, Eldritch, Zadira, Nicholas Halden, Michael Meineke, Joe, Michael Piccone, Cosima, and Eduardo. Have a great day, everyone.